BBC Radio 4 using hashtag you and yours, and that's one word, of course. But first, an MP is calling for a change in the law over the regulation of laser eye surgery. Currently, there are no specific requirements for surgeons who perform the surgery. They just have to be members of the General Medical Council, and the GMC has no guidelines of their own on this subject. The bulk of laser eye surgery is done privately, and it's widely available on the high street. Someone who regretted having it done is Sarah Knapp from Hessel in East Yorkshire. She says that her eyes are worse than they were before the operation.
I get shooting pains, soreness, unbearable itchiness, and I've actually seen an independent specialist in the last 2 months, and I've actually learnt that they're a result of nerve damage in the right eye. I think it's disgusting that they can offer this on the high street to anybody can walk into their clinics and be offered surgery on your eyes, which are one of your most precious parts of your body, and that it's not regulated. I actually can't believe it.
Sarah Knapp talking to BBC Look North East Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. Well, John McDonnell is the Labour MP for Hayes and Harlington. He's got a 10-minute rule bill being read in Parliament on this. John McDonnell, what changes do you want to see?
I want to ensure that there is proper statutory regulation to address some of the problems that we've experienced over the years. I sponsored a bill by my colleague, the late Frank Cook, way back in 2005, which highlighted the problems that people are experiencing. At the moment, there's pressurised salesmanship that's going on to encourage people to undertake this eye surgery. There's not enough advice to people with regard to the possible problems that may incur. There's a lack of aftercare, and then when there are problems, there's a failure by many of these companies to acknowledge or address these problems. I want to have some form of statutory regulation so we get the best practice instilled across this, what is a growing industry now.
Well, let me bring in Professor Dan Reinstein. He's the medical director at the London Vision Clinic. You conduct this kind of surgery yourself. Do you agree? Does there need to be more regulation?
I do agree. As a specialist, I'm someone who only does laser eye surgery, so my concentrated career is on this one subject. I agree with everything that we just heard. In fact, Frank Cook, who was actually a laser eye surgery patient, started this process, and it's great to see that despite the fact that he passed away last year, the work is still going on.
So I suppose the obvious question, Dan Reinstein, is if surgeons agree and legislators agree, or MPs like, why hasn't it happened?
Well, I think that's a little bit harsh. A lot has happened thanks to Frank Cook's early work. The Royal College responded to the activity in Parliament at that time and formed a committee on laser refractive surgery. I was part of it. There were representatives from all warps of the profession in this area. And actually, since then, there has been a fairly, I would say very detailed curriculum set up so that all people training in laser eye surgery in the UK go through laser refractive surgery training, and there's also a certificate which the college offers.
But that's voluntary, isn't it? You don't have to actually take exams.
Well, yes, that is true, and that's a good question, but you may need to, unfortunately, you might get into a very complicated ground if you're going to legislate that surgeons obtain a certain subspecialized qualification within a specialty, because then you'd have to say, is this cardiac surgeon qualified to replace that part of the heart versus that part of the heart? Does he have to have a certificate for that part? And it is the job of the Royal Colleges to effectively produce the training standards and monitor whether the training standards are being adhered to.
Okay, let me go back to John McDonnell, because Dan Reinstein agrees with you, but he doesn't think that legislation will help.
No, we're in agreement here with Dan in terms of the whole processes. Frank Cook's work was excellent. He was an old colleague of mine, and it's a tribute to him that's moved on in this way, but it hasn't gone far enough. The systems that are in place are simply not working effectively. Sasha Rodoy, who's a patient who suffered similar problems that we heard on that clip, set up the My Beautiful Eyes campaign. She's receiving 3 cases a day of where things have gone wrong and there hasn't been adequate support or redress. And at the same time, I've met solicitors who are taking up case after case, only being settled at the door of the court, who are not receiving adequate support or compensation. So, yes, the voluntary system improves things over the last 5 years, but not sufficiently. That's why we need regulation.
Dan Runston, briefly, what do we need?
Look, I agree with everything that John has said, and in fact, I think what we need is we need to continue the progress. If John would like to communicate with the college and potentiate this and catalyze the speed at which the uptake for this certification is at the moment, I think there are 50 out of 150 are qualified through the certificate now. I completely agree with it. I think for the moment, what we have to say is that post-operative care, as John mentioned, is one of the critical components of success. Complications, of course, it's a surgical procedure. They can occur, but in refractive surgery, complications, if managed appropriately, very rarely lead to a permanent problem.
Gentlemen, we will have to leave it there, but we will keep a close eye on this, if you'll forgive the pun. Thank you very much indeed. Now, it's the Ideal Homes exhibition for disabled people, basically, the NADEX. It showcases products and